Welcome to all of you to this afternoon's webinar. This is the first in this year's From the Winner's Circle series, which features the Chamber of the Year award-winning programs. In today's webinar, Kit Kramer, the President and CEO of the Asheville Area Chamber of Commerce, is going to share the story of the Chamber's WomanUP program, which provides professional education, mentoring, and inspiration to women at all ages and career stages in the Asheville area. With over 2,700 participants in its 2-year, 8-event history, the program sponsors the largest gathering of businesswomen in the region. So before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping reminders as usual. First, attendees are in listen-only mode during the webinar to avoid background noise. Second, after the presentation, we'll have time for questions, and you can ask those questions by using the question function of the webinar. There is a question box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Open that box up, type in your question, and I will read the question to Kit. You can go ahead and type in those questions as they come to you during the presentation, and we'll just take them all at the end. If we run out of time and don't get to your question, we will contact you directly. And if you have a question that you would prefer to discuss with Kit individually or with a member of her team, her contact information will be included in the presentation, so you can get in touch with her directly. And third, the presentation for this webinar has been uploaded to the webinar panel. So if you click on the handouts part of the panel, the box titled Handouts, you can click that and you can download that. Kit also has a number of additional resources relating to her event that she's going to make available to you all, and she'll probably mention them during the presentation, but we will post a link to all of those documents along with the webinar recording if you'd, when we post the recording in 2 business days, so by Monday, February 3rd. So with that, I'd like to introduce today's presenter. Kit Kramer became President and CEO of the Asheville Area Chamber of Commerce in November 2010. Under her leadership, the Asheville Chamber was named Chamber of the Year by ACCE in 2019, and the Chamber of the Year for North Carolina by the Carolinas Association of Chamber Executives in 2018. Before coming to Asheville, Kit was President of the International Downtown Association, IDA, headquartered in Washington, D.C., and then before that, she worked at the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce for 17 years. Kit was named as one of Business North Carolina's Power 100 in 2018 and 2019, and was one of 50 participants in the North Carolina Influencers Project by the Charlotte Observer, the Raleigh News and Observer, and the McClatchy Washington Bureau. A graduate of the University of Florida with a degree in journalism and PR, Kit is a native of Jacksonville, Florida, and is a certified chamber executive. She's been married to her husband, Mark, for 37 years, and they have 2 grown children, Catherine and Mac, who live in Charlotte. So thank you so much, Kit, for being with us today, and I'll just pass the presentation on to you.
Thanks, Susan. I appreciate it. And I wanted to give everybody just a framework about the Asheville Chamber so you can understand our size and composition. We've got about 1,700 members. We're about the 3rd largest chamber in North Carolina, which is pretty surprising given that we're about the 10th largest city. And we're in western North Carolina, beautiful mountains. It's a gorgeous place to visit. Or if you want to relocate and spend money or bring a business here, we welcome you. We've got about a $4.2 million budget this year. At the time that we started this program, we were probably at a $3.2 million budget. So our composition is the chamber, which includes the Economic Development Coalition, plus a very large, beautiful visitor center. We have a total of 24 employees. Our city population is around 90,000. Our county's around 250,000. And our 4-county metropolitan statistical area is about 461,000. So we're growing at a nice steady pace, but we're not huge. It's very much a small business community and a lovely place. So I highly recommend that you visit with us. So let me tell you about WomanUP. When we, as part of the process of applying for Chamber of the Year, you do program synopses. So one of these, the one synopsis we did was on WomanUP, and they ask you to address a particular impact area. And our impact area was building a better workforce. Asheville has led the state in low unemployment rate for over 4 years, which is just shocking to us. And so building a workforce, a better workforce, is part of that discussion. And in terms of the Horizon Initiative, we identified that with the population shift portion of the Horizon Initiative, this community is interesting in that it is very varied in terms of its political views and lifestyles, not super diverse from a racial perspective, very diverse in lifestyle and views. And so the population shift element appealed to us from a diversity and inclusion perspective. And so those were the areas that we focused upon. We had conversation in our executive committee at the Chamber about diversity and inclusion, and we have a very small African American population and a slightly larger and growing Latinx population. But at the point in time that we were discussing this, the low-hanging fruit for us from a diversity perspective was to talk about women in business. We had that discussion at our executive committee, and I could not get much excitement, with the exception of one of my board members. And actually, you can see her in this picture, Laura Webb of Webb Investment Services, who will become the chair of the Chamber next year, is passionate about small businesses and about women in business, and she's in financial services, so she's very interested in helping women understand their dollars and maximizing those dollars. So she was the one that talked with me about wanting to do something around women entrepreneurs, but we couldn't get much interest from our executive committee, and which was kind of frustrating. I actually brought it up twice and got very little interest. And but as we finally decided that, I decided, well, love the executive committee, but we're doing this anyway. And we decided what we wanted to do was focus on building this strong network of business women. We've got some wonderful women's organizations around philanthropy in our community, but there was no one who was doing anything in a large scale. We had a lot of small scale efforts, but no one was doing anything in a way that was kind of comprehensive for women in business. And we wanted these women to be able to inspire one another, to support one another in business endeavors. And we think that mentorship is super important, and wanted to be able to create a way to provide mentors for women. So in our community, 32% of women are CEOs of their companies, and that is lower than the 50% of the population that are women. So we see that as a challenge. We had a very clear message from our Young Professionals of Asheville group about their desire for professional development. So we knew that there would be a level of interest around that. And as I mentioned before, we thought that that this would be a good way to begin to address diversity, to expand it beyond women in business, and to also look at women of color, people in a variety of businesses, in a variety of ages and stages of their own careers, lifestyles, and even abilities. So we saw ourselves being able to serve as a backbone organization for some of these entities that were doing smaller scale types of work in supporting women in business. And we also knew that in this market, sponsors were very interested in finding ways to tap into the female market. So those were all the needs that we identified. So we began to work with a committee who was interested in and centered in on professional growth and inspiration, taking the existing awards that we were currently doing. We were doing one Woman Entrepreneur of the Year award, but expanding that to a larger audience, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. And then also creating a platform for collaboration to really hone the programming so that it met multiple needs and could support those smaller entities that were engaged. And that was really driven by my chair, who was very interested in getting to know the other women who were engaged in supporting women in business at whatever size. And she was a driving force in that. And the last thing, of course, as a Chamber of Commerce, we earn every cent every year from a variety of mechanisms. We wanted this program to be self-sustaining. So we used different methods in putting this together. We convened a committee that represented all of those aspects of diversity that I've already mentioned, whether it's race, ethnicity, industry, ages, stages of their particular business, etc. It also represented those organizations that I previously mentioned. And they decided the theme for the first year was going to be building your network. My chair had encountered a book called The Stiletto Network, and we were able to hire the woman who was the author of that book to come and speak about how to build your own network. And that was super interesting because when we finished, it was interesting that the respondents wanted the chamber to build networks for them. And we basically went back to them in the next session and said, love you guys, but we're not building that. We're teaching you to build your own network because that's the way it's got to work. The second year, we did knowing yourself and focused in on a variety of issues of understanding yourself and what your strengths and weaknesses are and how to play to them. And that particular year included a woman named Christine Darden. Christine Darden was one of the original human computers that were featured in the book Hidden Figures that later became a movie. And that was all occurring at the same time. So she also is an African American and actually was trained in Asheville in one of the buildings that has been repurposed since then. So it was super cool to be able to connect that aspect of history along with the Hidden Figures discussion. So that was the themes have ended up being very important because we hang all of the programming around those themes as the year goes by. We also reconfigured the awards, as I mentioned. So in addition to Woman Entrepreneur of the Year, we added a Woman Executive of the Year and an Outstanding Woman Nonprofit Leader. And then in a subsequent year, added a Rising Star Award that focused on a young woman in her career. And that has been, we've received a lot of good response to that and identified some really wonderful woman talent that we can then incorporate into a variety of the Chamber's work. So we also did that cross-pollination with other organizations, and this is just a sampling of the types of organizations. Our community college, for example, has a small business incubator that had a focus on women. We had the Small Business Administration had a program that focused on women. The SBTDC and other organizations. We have an organization called Mountain BizWorks here that focuses on entrepreneurs and had a special program oriented towards women. We brought all those people to the table, as well as those organizations that focused in on women of color in particular, because we wanted to increase our diversity and representation through this event and to be able to utilize that throughout the chamber. We also went after sponsors, and as I said, there was a real interest from the very beginning. We just didn't realize how much of an interest there was going to be. And we utilized evaluations, both literal in-face live surveys using a program called Menti womanup.com where people could use their smartphones and vote and provide the mood of the room right on the spot, as well as follow-up surveys that we did online through email or literal paper cards that people could fill out. And the committee was really intent on making corrections in response to what had been heard on all of those surveys. As I said, with sponsorship, so we were about, we're all about cash here. We love cash at the Asheville Chamber, but we would also use trade if it was a budget reducer. So we were after cash, trade, and ticket sales. And the first year we grossed $52,000, which netted us $20,000 in the first year, which we felt was a really good return. I mean, we've done a 5K run for about 14 years and net a similar amount of money out of that. Well, the sponsors went crazy, and in the second year we grossed $126,000 and netted $71,000 in that second year. And that popularity amongst our sponsors has continued into the third year. So it's been a very popular type of program. You can see in this picture, these are an example of the award winners, and we commission artists, local artists, to produce the awards, and they're different every single year, and that makes them super popular, and these were very cool looking. Our communications was pretty robust. We used eVites to send out the invitations, also to communicate about the awards nominations process. We have an e-newsletter that we do once a week that incorporated information about WomanUP. We also produce flyers that we used at our other various chamber events and created a special landing page where we provided sponsor recognition in all of these various tools. We also worked with the local media through press releases and even involved some local media. The local executive editor of the paper served on the WomanUP committee, which meant she provided some pretty good coverage for it. We also did trade with a variety of different types of advertisers in order to publicize the event. That ice sculpture, is that unbelievable? Our chairwoman wanted to make sure, since we started out with the Stiletto Network, we kind of adopted that shoe as an image, and it had an ice sculpture every year, and people always loved to pose in front of it. We also utilized our committee members and our partners that were also supporting women in business by giving them ready-to-use promotional materials. So we would give them samples of social media posts that they could put out there, or emails that they could send, or paragraphs that they could drop into their own publications, and links to videos that we produced. The social media was also very robust. We've got a Facebook event page and photo albums for every event we do, as well as the information, the speaker profiles, and things like that we would incorporate. And each time we would emphasize the AVL WomanUP hashtag in order for us to be able to see the types of impact we were having on social media. We also had a woman photographer who would go out and do all the photography, and that was a trade that she would do that for. And she got some great advertising and exposure out of it. The videos that were done on smartphones with little light attachments on them, and would be done in the offices of volunteers or here at the chamber, but they were basically pitching the concept in a variety of ways, and those seem to go over really well too. We engaged our sponsors by providing them with print advertising, signage at the events, as well as their logo in the presentation slides that would serve as part of the backdrop. And we provided each of them a post-event report that showed the success of the program. We give them access to the survey results. we'd give them information about who was in attendance so that they could make contact. And that was for the higher level sponsorships. And also, we focused in on trying to build in some post-event engagement. The Facebook group that we had for WomanUP was one of the ways that people could reconnect, and it was really interesting. And in the first meetings that we held, when we were focusing on building a network, our chairwoman exercised her relationships and got CEOs, women in top leadership positions in businesses throughout the community, to participate as table facilitators and as mentors for that particular event. But that made some of those groups that were formed would connect through the Facebook group after the meeting, and some have even continued to meet. We'd give them links to any of the resources that were mentioned if we provide skill building information, or if there was a presentation, photographs, survey results, all of those things we would provide links to, as well as the email list for online sign-ups. And we used a variety of evaluation members. So we would measure by the number of participants we had, what the survey ratings would look like in follow-up surveys that we would do. We could all literally see what the responses were to various questions we would ask on menti.com, when people would use their smartphones and answer on the spot. And we also then collected information from the women executives who served as table mentors and facilitators. If they got feedback, they would relay that information back to us. And we also measured ourselves on how diverse our participation was in terms of various aspects of diversity. So the result was the largest gathering of businesswomen in the region, with plenty of sponsorships to make the program a really solid revenue generator. And we were very pleased with that result, as were our sponsors. So as Susan said at the beginning, we've had over 2,700 participants. That was in the first 2 years, so you could easily add at least another 1,000 on top of that for this last year. The survey ratings have been 9.3 on a scale of 10, and we have 350 members of that Facebook group that I mentioned. We've also had more women and more women of color on the Chamber's board and committees. In fact, our board representation is better than the representation of our particular community. And that almost $72,000 in net income with sponsorships was a real boon to our budget in that second year. Our keys to success, as far as I'm concerned, the fact that we focused on women seemed to really resonate with people. We started off with the idea of pulling together former winners of the Woman Entrepreneur Award to do a panel discussion for our young professionals of Asheville. And what we found was, when we publicized that, we had a standing room only room, mostly of young women, but also some very smart young men. And we felt like we had tapped into a market that we really wanted to appeal to. So that was highly successful, but focusing in on helping people connect with one another, it was also a huge factor. And it has shown time and time again in the survey results that people are looking for ways to connect in a genuine way. That use of women executives, the CEOs and the senior level executives from throughout the community that were recruited by my chairwoman, was super important, because I think it gave some gravitas to the event that was really interesting, and allowed those women to share their stories and their barriers and how they overcame them, and it was super meaningful to the people who might be early on in their career to be able to connect and learn from those folks. the fact that we had all those other organizations engaging in the promotion was bound to be helpful. And if nothing else, it generated extreme goodwill for our organization on the whole, and for our desire to be more open and more connected with one another. And we have used that committee in a very meaningful way and for the long term. One of my staff people who rides herd on this particular project on a day-to-day basis was kind of groaning when I said to her, we've really got to use this committee, because frankly, the use of a committee is not always as efficient as doing it as staff. But without a doubt, we end up with a better product every time we use a committee, because they bring us ideas that we would not have connected to. They're also personally committed to the project and are therefore very interested in following through and posting on social media and letting others know and taking pictures at the event to let people know that they are an integral part of how the panel came together. So most recently, I had the Western North Carolina Chamber execs do their retreat here in Asheville, and they did a panel discussion with our committee members to talk about what they found about participating in this particular committee to be rewarding. So that seemed to work really well. Susan also mentioned that she's going to post the link. We have a much longer link to all the items that we included as sample materials that are in DropBox. But here's a shortened URL that you can use if you have ants in your pants and you want to see the kinds of things we did. So we tried to be pretty comprehensive, because all of those things go into ACCE's samples library, and we know how helpful it is to us when we can see what other chambers are doing. So we wanted to turn around and give everybody that opportunity as well. I'll mention that some of the printed materials, we did slightly change some of the branding, and you may see some differences there. We utilized a relationship with a branding company, did some trade, paid them for a portion of it, but also did some trade to come up with the branding. But there are samples of all kinds of things in this particular file that you can find on DropBox, and I encourage you to connect to that. Last but not least, if you have questions, you are more than welcome to email. Email is my preferred mechanism, frankly. I'm rarely in my office to answer my phone, and I'm just a visual learner. So I prefer questions by email. And Leanne Briggs, who is the person who is on point for working on this program on a day-to-day basis, if you've got things that are high-level questions, that are surface-level questions, I can answer them. But if they're detailed questions, you're probably going to need to ask Leanne, because she is the one that works directly with the committee. I found that I was very involved at the beginning of the program and helping shape it, but once it took off, there was the committee, and Leanne really took over. So I'm super proud of the work that they've done. So Susan, that's about it for me.
Okay. Well, thanks, Kit, and thanks for all of the resources that you're making available too. What an exciting program, and really appreciate you presenting on it. We do have a few questions. Folks, if you haven't typed in a question yet and you have one, go ahead and do so, and I'll just kind of start at the top and get through as many as we can. So the first question, Kit, is what was your criteria for award winners?
Oh, gosh. You know what? That's probably one of the things that we didn't include, but we've got all that information, and I'll be happy to work with Leanne to get that posted. The criteria has been refined and refined and refined again, and the committee actually chooses those winners. It's not staff-driven. So in the case of, and nominations are taken, and the committee members will study the nominations, but each one has separate criteria and that were established by the committee. So when we had this long-standing Athena Award once upon a time. It became a Woman Entrepreneur Award which had different criteria, but then the rest of them were established by the committee members, and they felt it was really important. We had presented that Woman Entrepreneur Award at our annual meeting, and we'll get 700 to 800 people at that meeting. And at the first celebration event for WomanUP, we had more people at that event that year than we had at annual meeting, which that was a pretty. So there were almost 800 people in the room.
Okay. What was the program for the women executives as table mentors or facilitators for the YP event?
That first mention that I gave you of building your network was the first way we engaged the women executives, and we had them serve as table facilitators to begin with. We probably had 45 women. I mean, the head of the hospital system, the county manager, the city manager. There were any number of women who ran manufacturing companies. We rated the list of contacts of a group of women who get together routinely and got all of them on board to serve as the table facilitators. And it was pretty structured. We gave them questions to use, but the conversations that occurred after the structure were where the magic happened. And it was really interesting. As I said, there were all kinds of people who made requests of me wanting to join that group of women. And I said, that's not the point of this. The point of this is not to join somebody else's already existing, long-held relationships. It's to form your own. And we're going to teach you how to do that. And no, we're not going to form them for you. We're giving you the tools to go out and form them yourself. And so we literally gave them step-by-step instructions. One of the women that is a part of that group is a super talented speaker and who provided a toolkit that could be used by those women executives, which had all kinds of information about the types of things women could do to build their own network.
Do you have a copy of that kit, the toolkit or the questions that they asked at the table?
You know what? I don't know. I don't know about that. I imagine Leanne has it. That would be one to send to Leanne Briggs, a request to send to Leanne at lbriggs@ashevillechamber.org.
Okay, perfect. This next question is, can you share a little bit about the other programs or events during the year other than the big main event, I guess, you've been talking about? Are they quarterly and what are the format for those events?
Yeah, they're quarterly. So we have found that breakfasts work really well for this group. It doesn't work well for all groups. I mean, we'll have women who are trying to get kids off to school who will complain about their early meetings, and that we've also reshaped them over time based on the feedback we get. But for example, the next one we'll have their quarterly events. The next one we'll host is in March. And in November is when the celebratory event occurs where we present all the awards. We'll utilize some of the award winners who will then present, and we've had them present in a panel form before. We've also selected one to pair along with a person who hasn't won an award and who may be a new business owner or may have overcome particular barriers that we wanted to focus on. So depending upon the theme, we kind of try and highlight the talent that has gone before. Then we want to build skills, so we'll focus in on finding ways to help build skills for whatever the theme happens to be that year. And then the third event is a celebratory event, which is in November. And so the year we used Christine Darden and of Hidden Figures fame, we had her speak as well as a woman who started Troy & Sons, a moonshine distillery here. And that we were talking about overcoming barriers in that particular year. And Troy Ball is her name. She has actually written a book about her experience. She had 2 children born with extreme disabilities, and her challenge of how she went about keeping them alive, frankly, and then once they reached adulthood, she went out and became an entrepreneur and started a moonshine business that has been very, very successful. So we paired up those conversations. We also partnered that year with the Foundation for our Local School System to bring a number of young people, both girls and boys, from area schools to hear Dr. Darden talk about what it was like to be an African American woman who was in the sciences and went to work for NASA. And that, I think, broadened the reach of our events. So each one has been slightly different. I'd say that the fact that they're at breakfast and the fact that we have an ice sculpture of a shoe has been about the most common element, other than we also always try and get a sense of the room and feed that back to everybody at the end, and then use whatever feedback we get to build upon the next event. So sometimes it'll be, a set of questions that a facilitator leads people through at a particular event, and there's lots of direct networking. But sometimes it's a speaker who comes in. We had Rebecca Ryan come in and speak at one of our events, and they loved her so much we brought her back the next year for to talk about the future of women in business. So there's been a variety, and if you go to AshevilleChamber.org and type in WomanUP in the search field, you'll likely find lots of materials there from previous WomanUP events. Or go to that Facebook page and check that out.
Okay. Do you release the winners of your awards ahead of time or during the event?
Well, I think we've probably done it both ways, because the theory was if they're a nominee, then we're going to sell more tickets because of all the supporters.
Right.
But I think we probably started out that way, but then began to share the information about who the winners were, but made a conscious decision to make a much bigger deal out of who was nominated. So we've done both, and both seem to have worked very well. But we thought it was important to honor those that were nominated and make sure that everyone knew who they were. So, we have them stand during the meeting, and I think that has resulted in us getting more nominations over time.
Okay. Were the sponsors for the main event, the awards event, I guess, all sponsors for the entire program, covering all events throughout the year? Or is it, I guess,
there were
sponsors for individual events? Yeah.
We sell through a total resource campaign the sponsorships, and originally there were presenting sponsors and there were in-kind sponsors, and we had different tiers of sponsorship level with corresponding amounts of including sponsors for the awards, frankly. So that has also been reshaped over time, and actually, I don't know whether you can probably see the sponsors. We have a whole booklet that we do on sponsorship opportunities that would be available on our website as well. And we've got the newest one out because our Total Resource campaign officially kicks off on Monday. And actually, the volunteers have done such a great job. But for example, there's a speaker sponsor, and there's a limit of 1 on that speaker sponsorship. There are 5 award sponsors. There's a vendor display sponsorship, which is a very low price, and in an effort to focus in on some small business opportunities. We have a bronze, silver, gold, and then presenting sponsors, and we have a limit of 3 presenting sponsors. So our tickets we also sell by the table, as well as, and we give them a discount if they'll buy them in an early bird way, but they can purchase those through the campaign as well. So it's and all of that's outlined in the sponsorship opportunities, which is available on our website.
Okay. Well, that answered a couple questions here. Another related one is what was the individual ticket cost, and has it grown over time based on the growth of your program?
Well, if you buy a table of 8, it's $500, and that's before September 30th. And then if it's $600 for a table of 8 after September 30th. And just so you'll know what the sponsorships are, and you know, all of these are scalable depending upon the size of your chamber, but our presenting sponsors were $10,000 each. Gold level is $5,500, silver was $3,000, bronze was $2,000, and you could name the awards. In fact, we actually had this year the Woman Executive of the Year is now the Suzanne DeFerry Woman Executive of the Year, named after a former chair of the chamber, and that was purchased to honor her in her retirement as CEO of the bank by First Bank here locally. But that would be an additional $5,000 per year. And the speaker sponsors who actually get to introduce the speaker, that's $6,000. And again, that one's limited, as are the award sponsors. We have a limit of 5 for those.
Okay. How do you encourage male attendance, or do you encourage male attendance? And has this been an issue at all?
Actually, the first meeting, I remember noting that there were just a handful of really smart men in the room, and we've made a big deal out of that. And they were there largely because they were sponsors. And in fact, one of them was talking about having been in the room, but it has been interesting. The program has been so well responded to that there are plant managers who now bring a bunch of their women and buy a couple of tables, and they will come along with them. And so it's still predominantly women, but there are certainly men in the room, including the chamber's senior staff that happen to be men as well. And we just always refer to them as being smart. And the handful of, and it's more than a handful these days, but it's still, and there's never been an issue. We've always wanted them to feel welcome.
Okay. Is the WomanUP name proprietary, or can others use it?
Well, so I had a board member say, I really think this is so successful, you need to go out and get a trademark on the name. And to our great disgust, there is already a trademark on that name. And so they said, well, we're going to change the name. I said, no, we're not. We're just going to kind of hang in. We're in a local market. We're not trying to follow their branding in any way, shape, or form. So forgiveness instead of permission. So good luck with that. I don't know if it will be sued. Look, I mean, we got together and brainstormed it, and you know how you always hear the phrase "man up," and encouraging people to toughen up. Well, that's where WomanUP came from, and this again was very much the involvement of the committee in coming up with that name. But apparently, we haven't been the only ones who've done that.
Okay. Well, those are all
Nobody
the questions
reported.
I don't see any other questions. If you all have any questions, the way to ask them is to type them in. You can go ahead and do that now if you'd like, or if you'd rather email questions to Kit or Leanne, or check their website out, or their Facebook page. So it sounds like there's a ton of information available, and as Kit mentioned, I'll also post a link to a Dropbox that includes lots of different specific resources. So I don't see, let's check one more time here. Let's see, anything else? So I guess that's it. Well, thank you, Kit, so much for presenting what extraordinary program, so inspirational, and really congratulations on its success. And thank you, all of you, for your attention and your good questions. As I mentioned before, I'll post the recording of the webinar and the other resources no later than Monday, February 3rd. And I post those on our webinar page, which you can get to by clicking on Professional Development, hovering over ACC University Online, and then clicking on Webinars. And all of our webinars that we have done over the past several years are in reverse chron order on that page, so just click and listen and access the resources we have there as well. Our next ACC University webinar will be on Thursday, February 13th. It'll be the next in our From the Winner's Circle series. Kelly Hall, CCE, President and CEO of the Longview Chamber, will present on her Chamber's Every Child Has Access program, which is an outgrowth of the Chamber's efforts to ensure a qualified, skilled workforce and prime the regional economy for sustainable economic growth. The ECHA included the launch of the East Texas Advanced Manufacturing Academy, which connects businesses and educational systems to supply capabilities for the existing and expanding East Texas manufacturing industry base and provide local students with pathways to industrial jobs. So you can register for this webinar on our ACC events page, which you can click on by clicking on Professional Development, hovering over events, and then clicking on upcoming webinars, or we will be sending out an e-blast on that webinar itself. So thank you again, Kit, for taking the time to present today's webinar, and thanks everyone for your participation and interest. Wishing all of you a wonderful afternoon, and we will see you on the next ACC webinar. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Susan. Bye.